Well, now to a conversation about the well-being of children in Michigan. This year's Kids Count report was just released. It measures trends in education, health, and more. Let's take a look at some of these key findings, starting with schools. The majority of students reading proficiently in third grade dropped by nearly 10% statewide. For eighth graders, it dropped more than 18.5%. The cost of childcare also going up in most of Michigan's 83 counties, with an average jump of $261 every single month. There is some positive news. Michigan's child poverty rate has dropped by 9% and fell in most counties. To get more into the results, we are joined by Anne Kuhnen. She is the director of Kids Count. Anne, thank you so much for joining us. Can you kind of help us understand a little bit, especially on the proficiency level? Those numbers going down, trending in the wrong direction. What's the issue?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this happening not just in Michigan, right? Nationally, student outcomes are down, particularly in like fourth grade reading, eighth grade math. And we know that obviously for some of that, the pandemic was very disruptive for students. It made it difficult for students to keep up with school. But now we're looking a little bit beyond the pandemic and we're still seeing these low results. And, we see in Michigan things like high rates of chronic absenteeism that are definitely a concern, but also just making sure that students are coming to the classroom really ready to learn. We know that things like having a safe bed to sleep in, having healthy food to eat, having a safe way to get to school are all really important when it comes to student outcomes.
So, of course, all those are factors here, many of them social factors at home before the kids even get to school. If I'm an educator, and I know your report just came out here, but what's the answer here? Because you have some students that are proficient, some that are excelling, some falling behind, all in the same classroom. So what's your takeaway there? And what do educators do about that?
Yeah, so I mean, at the end of the day, educators rely a lot on the state and our lawmakers to be making good decisions about investments in our schools and in children, right? So we just saw a lot of new investments in the budget that was passed recently in Michigan, specifically for education, but there's definitely some areas that continue to, not be the top of the priority list. So one of the things that we saw in the report this year, for example, was that the share of students who are receiving special education services is now at an all-time high in Michigan, but we continue to rely on this pretty inequitable funding formula where the state is only reimbursing schools less than 30% of the cost of special education services and asking schools to make up the difference with, local millages, which can be really inequitable. So, there's definitely some of it comes down to what's happening in the classroom, but a lot of it is about what kind of investments we're choosing to make at the state level.
Gotcha. Let's talk about the cost of child care here, because I'm sure that's an effect as well. Up almost $300 every single month. Not much of a surprise, because we know that with our economy, everything is getting more expensive. But did those numbers surprise you, just how much they were?
It doesn't necessarily surprise me. We know that childcare receives a lot less state and federal investment compared to, say, K-12 education. However, I will note that, yes, childcare costs are up. It's really a lot more than the rate of inflation has increased over the same time period. So it's really exceeding the cost of other things that are increasing at the same time. And, for families, this makes up a huge share of the household budget. It's one of the most expensive things, typically on par with, food or a mortgage or rental costs.
So on that note, what trends have you seen in enrollment numbers? Because my understanding is that because the cost of raising a child and having a family are so exorbitant now, some people are just choosing not to have kids.
Yeah, I mean, so number of babies that we have every year in Michigan. It's just about 100,000 each year. That has been declining a little bit, but really a lot of our state investment should be focused on making sure that the children that do live here, that the families that are able or do want to have children have the resources that they need. And that includes things like being able to afford rent, being able to afford healthy food, and having access to things like childcare and a great K-12 school in their district.
Okay, let's talk about one positive. I don't want to focus on all the negative here. The rate of poverty dropping by 9%. That's good. Did that surprise you at all?
No, we have seen a lot of investments in children in recent years, particularly with the pandemic. We saw a lot of new federal investments that were good for children, for both their households as well as the communities and the schools that they attend. But of course, we know that that's not a guarantee, right? A lot of this is at risk right now because of some historic cuts that we've seen this year to certain, poverty alleviation programs like food assistance, like Medicaid, that families really rely on.
So we went through the report and kind of picked our headlines, the things that we thought were the big news leaders there. What do you think in terms of what the report said overall?
Yeah, I mean, some of it, we saw certainly some improvements, particularly when it comes to health. 97% of kids in the state of Michigan have access to health insurance. This is a huge win and something that we should definitely celebrate. We have seen very well reported how our education numbers are continuing to decline, and that's definitely continuing to be a concern. When it comes to maybe some surprises in the report, I would say that certainly the food insecurity data is something that we'll want to keep watching. We saw that food insecurity among children rose for kind of the first time in over a decade. And so, knowing that there's been cuts to food assistance programs, that's definitely something that we're going to need to pay attention to moving forward.
Yeah. Okay, Anne, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate all your insight into the report, and we'll see what next year's report says.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, take care.